We are not taking this Board of Peace seriously enough. I just did a deep dive, and my God, please stay with me on this one. It's a little like how we reacted to Space Force before we knew it was permanent, except this one is on a whole different level. So the board consists of 6 members, including a chairman for life, which is, of course, Donald Trump, and 5 other board members, which are Marco Rubio, Jared Kushner, Tony Blair, Mark Rowan, who runs Apollo Global Management, and Steve Witkoff. It's supposed to be what they're calling a private sector-led alternative to the United Nations. The board is set up as a private treasury model, much like the UN and the World Bank. Now, the chairman for life, Donald Trump, has exclusive authority to create, modify, or dissolve subsidiary entities and approve all administrative directives, so full control over everything. If this was a U.S. corporation, this setup would be illegal, but it gets a whole lot worse. One of the first executive orders that Trump signed on January 16th of 2025 was Executive Order 14275. This designates the Board of Peace as a public international organization. This gives the board and the funds that it holds the same legal privileges, tax exemptions, and immunities as the UN, completely shielded from judicial oversight and seizure by federal courts, if we were to actually try and have accountability someday. Membership on the board is really simple, pay to play, $1 billion. And so far, the countries that have contributed are Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Morocco, Bahrain, Uzbekistan, and Kuwait. And it was just announced today that you, the American taxpayer, is going to be contributing $10 billion to a fund exclusively controlled by Donald Trump, even if he's not president anymore. Now, here's where things start to get pretty scary. The first area is with crypto. Thanks to the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act, or the Genius Act, passed by Congress, the Board of Peace is designed to utilize stablecoin infrastructure. And Trump's own crypto venture, World Liberty Financial, is the primary vehicle. And the UAE bought 49% of World Liberty Financial 4 days before Trump was inaugurated. And a significant portion of the $17 billion that's already been contributed is being converted into USD1, Trump's stablecoin. And not only that, but the board can actually mint USD1 against US treasuries. And so they can spend funds without it ever even touching a traditional bank. And of course, the first place they're looking to do this is Gaza. They're calling it a Gaza relief package. But what it is an investment fund to build 200 hotels and 400,000 new homes in Gaza, completing the genocide. Now, the last part is probably something Scott Jennings would say gets my knickers in a twist. The fund has its own paramilitary force called the International Stabilization Force, or ISF. It's commanded by U.S. Major General Jasper Jeffries III. And it already has pledges of 20,000 soldiers and 12,000 police officers, mostly coming from Indonesia, Egypt, and Jordan. And to go back to Gaza, there are already plans to build a 5,000-person military base over 350 acres in Gaza. So even if we were to succeed in getting Trump out of there, he can sit around as chairman of the Board of Peace with full diplomatic immunity, a shit ton of funds, and his own army. Let that sink in. Hey guys, this Board of Peace stuff is moving really fast, and a whole lot more has developed in just a couple days since my last post. We've gone from a series of high-level announcements to on-the-ground implementation really quickly. The first is a deal with FIFA. And this is a lot of the early part of this is different investors making claims to different portions of Gaza. The plan is to build a FIFA ecosystem. This includes 50 mini pitches in residential areas, 5 full-size pitches, a state-of-the-art FIFA academy, and a 20,000-seat stadium. And it really should be no surprise that FIFA is first of the game here because they are the most corrupt sports institution there is, and thus very close with Donald Trump. All right, now to the real ugly stuff, as if gentrifying a war-torn area wasn't bad enough. In regards to Trump's stablecoin and crypto, if you remember, I said that they're going to use Trump's stablecoin essentially as the currency, bypassing traditional banks. Now, this part is a little complex, so stay with me. Trump's stablecoin USD1 now has what's called a fund pillar. This means that there are actual assets now backing it up inside the US Treasury. So this stablecoin is now essentially a digital treasury note. Now, the real scary part is that Apex Group, which is owned by Peter Hughes and based in Bermuda, is piloting Trump's stablecoin for tokenized fund settlement. What this means is that the funds that are moved within the Board of Peace, the public will be able to see, but they won't be able to see who did it, who moved it. And they designed it to avoid regulatory hurdles so that they can move money instantly. They're saying it's transparent because it's blockchain, but that's just not true. This allows them to bypass sanctions. And who's expressed interest in investing? None other than Vladimir Putin. Now to the Board of Peace private army. More countries have committed troops, so now we're at Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, and Albania. Again, Major General Jasper Jeffries III is in charge of the force, but an Indonesian deputy commander is the one that's going to be leading them on the ground. And then for their special police force, they've had 2,000 applicants in the first 24 hours. Many of these will soon be hired and then shipped off to Egypt and Jordan for training. So we'll be seeing this army, police force, and the new military base very soon. In fact, they already have contracts awarded for the 26 guard towers at the 350-acre facility. All right, I know that's a lot, and there's a lot going on right now, but when Joe Biden was president, there was, of course, massive Gaza protests, and rightfully so. But unfortunately, they've largely disappeared because our attention is so occupied. And I get that many are scared of the immigration crackdown, as this is all a part of it. But this Board of Peace Gaza project is almost to a place of no return. So I really hope that we can see some renewed energy like we've seen again opposing ICE in support of the Palestinian people. Thanks again, and if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my Substack, you could find the link in my bio. Kristi Noem wasn't fired. She was promoted and needed for the next phase of the Board of Peace. Things have changed quite a bit since my last post on this. What looked like a pretty significant setback now looks like an expansion, one that was to be expected. As I said before, Indonesia was supposed to provide the largest portion of troops for the Board of Peace's International Stabilization Force. They're now on the verge of completely backing out because of the war with Iran. They're a Muslim country and are concerned with being seen as supporting what's happening. And they've backed out of their 8,000 troop commitment. Then comes Plan B, the Shield of the Americas. Not that it wasn't already planned, but they're using this to fill the need. This is where Kristi Noem comes into play. Trump needs her to essentially be an account manager for these countries involved and work to get more included. A very powerful sales position. She'll be focused on migration and anti-cartel issues, but more importantly, these are being included in the scope of the stabilization force, which was supposed to be limited to Gaza. This is now a private military force to protect the Americas or anything else they want to. And they're already set to help with the blockades of both Cuba and Venezuela. I would imagine because Trump will need those resources abroad. The Indonesian troop gap will be filled and then some by Trump's best Latin American dictator buddies, Argentina, El Salvador, and Ecuador to start. Trump is also asking Congress for $50 billion in supplemental to the Board of Peace for what it's calling the war effort. Go back and watch my other videos to see how they've used crypto and stablecoin, Trump stablecoin, to be able to move money quietly, because that's what this is. This will allow them to pay countries and contractors for a private army. Kristi Noem and the Board of Peace are building a corporate military model and a private UN. And we'll probably never know how much she's getting paid, as this is a public international organization with immunity. Now, it should also be noted that there might be some desperation in this on the part of Trump, as he knows he probably won't have our allies with us, our traditional allies with us in this war against Iran. And so he needs more support. Either way, though, this is a big expansion. As usual, I don't really understand how the media is covering all this. They have access to the same information that you and I do, but they seem to just be covering it chaotically, like everything is a surprise. But I would imagine that's probably just our corporate overlords trying to keep us confused. But there is a clear path and intention to all this. Make no mistake. Trump is expanding his empire, if you will, and the Board of Peace is central to all of it. You guys are not going to believe this. Do you remember the $10 billion that I told you Trump transferred from the U.S. Treasury to the Board of Peace? If not, go back and watch those videos, but stay with me because this is a little bit complex. And it has to do with the TikTok sale and the funds from that sale. To backtrack a little bit, the reason the $10 billion avoided congressional oversight was because it was technically a contribution to an international body. This has to do again with how the Board of Peace was set up, like the UN or World Bank. The president has more flexibility and discretion in managing foreign affairs and fulfilling international obligations. On top of that, since the war in Iran has begun, the president has invoked wartime emergency authorities. Point of all this being that Trump keeps giving himself more and more flexibility over taxpayer funds. Okay, so Trump gives the Board of Peace $10 billion. So where did that $10 billion come from? Well, earlier this week, the Wall Street Journal reported that the TikTok sale wasn't just for $14 billion like we all thought, which was an extremely low amount. It was actually for $24 billion, with, wait for it, $10 billion in fees paid to the U.S. Treasury, the exact same amount. Now, as Axios reported, a typical mergers and acquisitions banker would charge between a 1% and 2% fee. This is a 70% fee. Now, I should be clear, we don't know for sure if this $10 billion in fact went to the Board of Peace, but come on. The TikTok deal was finalized right before the Board of Peace was launched in January. Senator Mark Warner's office is investigating and others have submitted FOIA requests. In fact, one of Axios' sources is quoted as saying, "You should FOIA the shit out of this." Guys, our country is being robbed blind. You and I can barely afford food and gas, and these guys are playing with our money like it's Monopoly. The war, Trump's crypto ventures, Board of Peace, it's all connected. We're watching this man use human lives as chess pieces to enrich himself. I'm glad Mark Warner's office is investigating this, and I'm glad that there's journalists doing their job, but the magnitude of this is huge, and that just isn't enough. This guy is accumulating so much power and wealth that it won't matter at some point if he's president or not. Him and his allies will still run the country. It's the Russian model. Putin is probably the richest man in the world. Even Elon Musk thinks so. And Trump has always wanted to be him. And he's on his way to doing it. You guys can always find all of my sources on my Substack. The link's in my bio. Hey, so remember that giant airplane that the Qataris gave to Trump to be the new Air Force One? Yeah, that's Trump's permanent chairman of the Board of Peace plane. Oh, and the Board of Peace is about to have troops on the ground and maybe expand to Iran, so let's dig in. For those just tuning in, this is unintentionally my fourth Board of Peace post because it just doesn't stop. In my last video, I told you how the $10 billion fee from the TikTok sale was being funneled into the Board of Peace. Thankfully, the House Appropriations Committee has launched an investigation into this, but we all know how that goes. The board has also now received at least $7 billion from its permanent members. That's Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Morocco, Bahrain, Uzbekistan, Vietnam, and of course, Hungary. They've also diverted $1.25 billion from foreign disaster relief and peacekeeping accounts into the board. And of course, the plane, which I'll get to again in a minute. So the board has likely brought in at least $20 billion already, and some of that money has already been funneled into World Liberty Financial, Trump's stablecoin venture, that's now backed by the U.S. Treasury. The Gaza reconstruction estimate is $70 billion, and they've barely even started and are already over a quarter of the way there. Now in regards to troops on the ground. Unfortunately, the hiccup with Indonesia didn't hold, and they are in fact sending 8,000 troops. Their troops will be combined with troops from Morocco, Kazakhstan, Albania, and Kosovo. U.S. troops will train them, and General Jeffries will lead them. They've already started construction of the 5,000 troop base in Gaza, and advanced teams are already there on the ground. And remember again, these troops only answer to the chairman for life of the Board of Peace, Donald Trump. Until now, the board has consistently stated that its only work is in Gaza, but we knew that that would change as they're already doing work in Cuba. They want to control the reconstruction of Iran as stated in Trump's 15-point ceasefire plan. A plan without a future, I'm sure, but Trump still sees himself there on the ground at the end of all this. They also want the Board of Peace to manage the negotiations for the ceasefire, which is crazy because the U.S. is a party to the war. But given that Qatar and the UAE are member countries, they may be able to do it for them. And finally, the plane. The $1 billion retrofit that Trump originally said was going to be paid for by private contributions will in fact be paid for through the Board of Peace. And the plane will be used for Board of Peace Strategic Command. You'll never hear all of this together from cable news because they're biased and lazy. They're putting in about as much research effort these days as content creators like myself that do it on their own. The Board of Peace is absolutely the story right now because it links all of this together. So please share and subscribe to my Substack. Thanks. Trump's insane trip to the brink of nuclear war makes a lot more sense in the context of his plan to control the world's major transportation corridors through none other than the Board of Peace. Let me explain. We need to start by backtracking to last September and the Gaza ceasefire negotiations. Trump then proposed a 20-point framework for this ceasefire. There were two major items in this plan: the complete removal of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. People tend to gloss over that. And the placement of control of Gaza in the hands of the Board of Peace. Now, the media seems to keep just wondering why Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff seem to be involved in all these negotiations. It's obvious they were named special envoys to the Board of Peace. They're essentially co-secretaries of state, and they were the ones leading the negotiations in Gaza. Now, one fact that people seem to always leave out about Gaza is its proximity to the Suez Canal, the closest outside of Egypt. And the Board of Peace is planning on constructing large ports and harbors to accommodate vessels coming from the Suez Canal. In fact, it's the centerpiece of their reconstruction plan. It's not just hotels like you've been told. Now let's travel to January of this year in Greenland. On January 21st at Davos, Trump met with the NATO chief and suddenly dropped his 25% tariff threat on Denmark. And he announced a framework of a future deal for the Arctic. The very next day is when Trump ratified the Board of Peace. And while NATO is handling the security in the Arctic under this framework, the Board of Peace acts as the strategic oversight board for long-term infrastructure and management of the region. This has all been put under something called Arctic Sentry. And so the board is set up to control commercial licensing and toll systems for the Northern Sea route. Okay, now onto the Windward Passage and Yucatan Channel near Cuba. And I know this is a lot, but stay with me. This one is not being managed by the Board of Peace, but by the Shield of the Americas. But there seems to be significant crossover as Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are also involved in these regions. And the Shield of the Americas is the one handling the blockade around Cuba, allowing only those it chooses, like that random Russian ship, to go through. And we've already heard Trump mention the Panama Canal. All right, now finally back to Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. The 10-point plan here had a lot of similarities to the one in Gaza. The difference, of course, is that Iran is huge and has a modern military. But Trump generally wants the same things, and we've already heard him mention this joint venture that he wants with Iran to control the strait. It should also be noted that Vladimir Putin is weighing participation in the Board of Peace, and he is, of course, an ally of Iran. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if this joint venture eventually included Russia. If the Board of Peace controls all of the world's major transportation corridors, it can hold the world hostage, kind of like Iran is doing now, but on a much bigger scale. He would be able to negotiate whatever he wants, even if he's not president anymore. You might be hopeful that a Democrat would come in and get rid of this thing, but it would be incredibly difficult to untangle all of these agreements and to rid Trump of the control that he has. Pete Hegseth said it best: they use bombs to negotiate. They don't hide it, the media just doesn't seem to want to focus on it. Iran, though, even though they're an ally of Russia, doesn't just do whatever Russia tells them to do. And so they are formidable on their own, and I don't know if they'll agree to this. In fact, I would tend to think they wouldn't, especially given their theocratic nature. This is a holy war for them. If we do end up moving in further, they'll be much more formidable than anything we faced in Iraq and Afghanistan, especially because we won't have nearly as much support. But if he does end up accomplishing this, and he always seems to, we're in for a world of hurt.